Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here today because, well, we're about to trace an incredible, sprawling, 250-year-old family tree. And this isn't just any family tree. This is a bloodline that didn't just casually witness history happening. They literally built the foundations of the American colonies, they sparked revolutions, and they laid the physical groundwork for the Florida towns of Groveland and Mascotte. So get ready, because we're going to unpack how the massive butterfly effects of American history are rooted right in our own backyards.
To really understand why this story is so special, you kind of have to look at the number 20,000. To put that into perspective, the local population of Groveland and Mascotte has absolutely exploded in recent years. We're talking rocketing from just 2,000 residents to over 20,000. And, when a community grows at that kind of lightning speed, just finding someone whose family has been around for a generation or two is pretty tough. But finding a sixth-generation resident, that is incredibly rare.
And that brings us perfectly to our guide for this historical journey, Jason Brown. Now, Jason is the president of the Groveland Historical Museum, and yes, he is one of those rare sixth-generation residents. As he so perfectly puts it, he's inviting us to take a climb up his very own family tree. And by doing that, we're going to see firsthand how the ancestors of just two local families played absolutely pivotal roles in shaping the entire nation. Okay, let's dive right into this.
All right, Section 1, the Brown lineage, and how they saved the Georgia colony.
So, the journey of Jason's ancestor, a man named Dr. Samuel Nunes, honestly reads like a cinematic thriller. Dr. Nunes was a Portuguese Jewish physician, and he wasn't just any neighborhood doctor, right? He treated the King of Portugal, high-ranking nobles, and even the Master Inquisitor himself. This was during the Inquisition, a terrifying time when members of the Jewish faith were being imprisoned and literally burned at the stake. But Nunes? He used his elite medical status to actually secure parole for his imprisoned family members. He then led them on this daring escape, joining a ship of Jewish refugees headed straight for the American colonies. They finally arrived in Georgia in 1733, right as this devastating yellow fever epidemic had already wiped out a huge chunk of the original 114 colonists, and that included the colony's only doctor.
There's just incredible tension in this moment. Governor James Oglethorpe had this grand vision for Georgia as a utopian anti-slavery society and a vital buffer against Spanish Florida. But when Dr. Nunes' ship showed up, a lot of the colonists actually demanded that the Jewish refugees be turned away. Oglethorpe, however, was a pretty sensible leader. He looked around at his dying colony, completely defied the angry colonists, and let them land. And that single high-stakes decision, it saved Georgia. Dr. Nunes immediately went to work using his vast knowledge of infectious diseases and herbalism. He set up the state's very first pharmacy, and he completely cured the residents of yellow fever.
The really crucial takeaway here is that Dr. Nunes' survival created this massive historical ripple effect. I mean, because he lived, he went on to befriend John Wesley, who later founded Methodism. His community survived a major attack on Savannah from Spanish Florida. His descendants fought in the Revolutionary War. And get this, they later purchased and actually restored Thomas Jefferson's rundown estate, Monticello. Oh, and they also helped make peaches the famous bounty of Georgia. But most importantly for our story today, his bloodline would eventually lead directly down to Groveland's founder, Simon Thomas Brown.
Moving on to Section 2, the Hart lineage, featuring rebellions, Masons, and even presidents. Now, on this side of the family, the American roots run incredibly deep. If we trace the ancestors of Jason's second great-grandmother, Henrietta Raulerson, we find them living in the Virginia colony way back in 1640. And they didn't just sit around quietly either. They were likely involved in some of the earliest uprisings against the king and Governor Berkeley. We're talking about movements where poor farmers and enslaved people actually united against unjust royal policies. And this was even before the notorious Bacon's Rebellion burned Jamestown to the ground in 1676.
Fast forward exactly 100 years from Bacon's Rebellion, and you guessed it, that revolutionary DNA shows up again. Henrietta's second great-grandfather, a man named Isham Peacock, took up arms for North Carolina in the Revolutionary War. But, well, things took a really dark turn for him when he was captured by British loyalists. Isham was put on trial and officially sentenced to execution by hanging.
And this right here just brilliantly illustrates how fragile history truly is. Isham Peacock was literally saved from the noose at the very last possible second. Want to know why? Because the British captain who was in charge of the execution suddenly discovered that Isham was a fellow Freemason. That secret fraternal bond was somehow strong enough to completely halt an execution in the middle of the Revolutionary War, which allowed this whole ancestral line to keep going. No way, right?
And Isham didn't just survive. He went on to live an absolutely epic life. After the war, he became this highly prominent primitive Baptist minister. In 1821, he crossed into Spanish Florida. Now, there was a strict ban on non-Catholic faiths down there at the time, and defying that ban meant risking execution. Again. But Isham just ignored the threats and went ahead and founded Florida's First Baptist Church anyway. He spent decades traveling the state, preaching, baptizing, and he didn't stop until he actually went blind at the incredible age of 101 back in 1843.
Let's see how this all builds into even more incredible American history. So another branch of Henrietta's tree goes back to a man named Andrew Robeson, who was actually the Chief Justice of Pennsylvania in 1693. Andrew's son, Israel Robeson, who happens to be Henrietta's third great-grandfather, was incredibly close friends with a guy named Mordecai Lincoln. And that friendship eventually blossomed into family when Mordecai Lincoln married Israel's sister as his second wife. Now, while that specific marriage produced a son named Abraham, it was actually through Mordecai's first wife that the bloodline eventually led to the President Abraham Lincoln we all know from the history books. So, because of this deeply intertwined family tree, Villa City founder Henrietta Hart is officially a direct fourth cousin to President Abraham Lincoln.
All right, bringing it all together in Section 3, the conversions and founding Groveland and Mascotte. It all finally converges with Jason Brown's two second great-grandfathers. First up, there's Simon Thomas Brown, that direct descendant of Dr. Samuel Nunez we talked about earlier. Around 1870, Simon founded a little community called Brown's Ford along the Palatlakaha River, which would eventually grow and be renamed Groveland. Meanwhile, you've got William Washington Hart, who was hired in 1885 to physically construct the very first 35 homes for the nearby community of Villa City.
But here's the thing. William Hart didn't just come to build houses. He brought his family. He and his wife Henrietta traveled north from Polk City, and when Henrietta arrived, she brought with her those centuries of revolutionary, resilient DNA right into the literal foundation of what would become Mascotte and Villa City. Together, these two families basically laid the physical and genetic roots of the whole region.
Which brings us to our final section, Landmarks Alive Today.
Jason Brown's family name isn't just in the history books, it's woven directly into the local map today. For instance, Brown's Ford Park honors Simon Thomas Brown in that very first settlement. Right nearby is Duke Cemetery, which is the final resting place of Simon's mother, Ellender, providing a direct physical link back to the colonial era. And honestly, if you drive through town, you're probably going to cross Simon Brown Road, which was named to honor the generations of the family that stayed and helped build the community.
And over on the Hart side, their physical legacy is just as striking. Hart Lake immortalizes both William and Henrietta. But remember, William Hart was a master carpenter, right? He constructed actual structures with his own two hands that are amazingly still standing today. He built the 1902 Edge House, which is literally the oldest standing structure in Groveland. He also built Mascotte's oldest home, the 1880s Judge Albert's house, as well as the beautiful 1904 Mascotte Church. The very structures that shelter this community's history were hammered together by the descendants of American revolutionaries.
So I want to leave you with a final kind of fascinating thought to take away from this explainer today. As you've seen, history isn't just some abstract thing that happens in far-off capital cities. It is actively carried in the bloodlines of the people building our local homes and founding our small towns. So think about this. Who is walking the streets of your town today, and what world-shaping butterfly effects might be hiding in their DNA, living right next door? Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible climb up the family tree.